Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hi, I'm Jess, and you're listening to Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
Today, we're going to talk about therapists and burnout and the simple truth that your therapist needs a break. This was partially inspired by us taking a week off this podcast last week because we were tired and we had other stuff in our lives coming up. And so we thought, you know what? We should actually take this as an opportunity to talk about how healthy taking breaks when you need them is. A lot of clients ask their therapists, do I burn you out or am I too much for you? And while it can feel really easy for a therapist just to say, like, oh, no, of course not, this is true in a lot of different helping professions. High rates of burnout and even suicide in medical, dental, and veterinary fields. And this impacts therapists as well.
I think that a lot of times we really have a limited capacity as therapists, how much we can actually see in a day. There are some therapists that will brag about seeing 8 to 10 clients a day. That is insane to me. I will never be able to have the same amount of energy for my first client as I would for my eighth. So I know that. And for myself, seeing around 4 clients a day is perfect for me. I feel like I have the exact amount of energy for every single one. I might have a supervisee after that, but I know that my energy level can kind of stay to that. And
Mm,
knowing that can really mitigate burnout. I think that a lot of when we're thinking about burnout within the helping professions, it really does come from a sense of not necessarily knowing your limit. A
mm,
lot of us, especially within social work, psychotherapy, as you said, like in the medical professions, with lack of funding and sometimes lack of staffing, it can feel like a lot of this lands on our shoulders. And knowing our capacity and knowing what our limits are can kind of get thrown by the wayside. Especially when we kind of feel like if I'm not going to do it, then who will?
hmm Absolutely. I love that you're kind of making that point. Like, I think, and we have more space to talk about when burnout happens shortly here, but I think that kind of guilt
Mhm.
that some helping people feel, probably most helping people feel, can be a big driver of what pushes us over into burnout. It's not just that I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed and I have this feeling that I should be doing more, or I should feel bad for taking care of myself.
Mhm.
I definitely resonate also with that, like, knowing I have kind of a maximum number of clients. My maximum kind of feels like it's more per week. I can have bigger days, but then I can't
Mhm.
have that big day the next day as well, right? I could see 6 clients in a day and be okay, but not the next day right after that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I've always been a person that likes to be in work mode and then not in work mode.
Mhm.
If I always have little bits of work mode throughout all the time, that's when I start to get exhausted and irritable.
It's interesting because it allows it to then not be, this is just like a one size fits all.
Yes.
Recognizing like what one of us can do and what the other one can do is kind of neat because it means like we understand our energy levels too.
hmm I will say I think that, often practitioners learn this through trial and error, right?
Yeah.
So often it's because we did just try to see too many clients in a day or too many clients in a week, and then we felt what that feels like for ourselves and for the energy we bring to our work. For me, I've found that one of the most helpful things is taking long weekends. So I don't necessarily always need my breaks to be long vacations, although I do also take those time to time. I find a big kind of boost in my energy if I take a 3 or 4 day weekend because I get that time off, and then also the weeks around it are a little bit shorter too. So it feels like a double win.
Mm.
And by the time I'm back in full weeks of work, I feel kind of refreshed. I feel like, okay, I'm back to it.
What you're talking about there too, Ryan, is the fact that a lot of us don't know we're facing burnout until we are,
Yeah.
until we're right into it. So what you're talking about with like a long weekend actually means that we're able to mitigate any sense of burnout before it happens. When you're in burnout mode, a long weekend's not going to save the day. A nice bubble bath ain't going to help you. Like you actually need to go on leave.
I don't know, my life has been saved by a number of bubble baths, but I do hear you. Like, there's a point at which, yeah, it's not gonna cut it. A nice evening doesn't make up for when you're at that point. It kind of makes me think of as a scout. I was in scouts. It's a little info for you listeners. I was a scout for my whole childhood, and they always had this adage at camp of they would ask us, "When do you drink water?" And we're supposed to say when we're thirsty, when we're not, and every time in between. I kind of feel that way about taking little sustainable breaks. You don't wait until
Mm.
you're burned out if you can help it. You take it, even if you look at the calendar, you're like, oh, I could take that long weekend. Like, technically, that's a bank holiday, but I don't know. Do I really need it? Yeah, you do.
Yes, I think that's perfect because this aspect of our helping profession is kind of thinking that we should be on. I think as a helper, taking breaks can be kind of seen as a sense that we don't want to help right now.
Mm,
That's weird. Like anybody can have a bank holiday. Anyone should have a long weekend. And being able to have that space means that, as you perfectly said with your other work, it allows us to actually come back 100% rather than consistently functioning at 75, 80. And
hmm
that I think that often when it comes to celebrating ourselves, that frivolity is usually something I like to think about. Do you think this is frivolous? Perfect. That is what's going to actually save the day here. A bubble bath
Mm.
or taking that long weekend or whatever it is, binge watching your favorite TV show, whatever you think is frivolous, most likely is not frivolous. It most likely is just fine and helps you kind of ease your body back into kind of caring for it.
hmm Yeah, I was actually inspired by one of the associates at Center Self recently saying like to find self-care and to practice it as almost as like a religion, that it's like a ritual that you do every day consistently. I have found that those are the things that help me kind of stay in it longer and not feel burned out, not feel like, God, I can't wait till I have a vacation, but I'm okay until my vacation, is when every day I have the same kind of reflective and self-care practices, and that the occasional times that they don't feel fun to do, that I just am kind of like, yeah, you're gonna do that anyway. I parent myself a little bit in that,
Yeah.
and try to find a balance between listening to my mind and body when I just need to just when I just want to be a couch potato or something. Um, and then most of the time doing the self-care habits.
Sometimes self-care can be being a couch potato.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, when do you take longer breaks?
For me, I like to take longer breaks at least a couple times a year. Like usually like to have an opportunity to travel a bit and like somewhere between the spring, summer, fall. It just varies based on where I might want to go, but I like to be able to take 2 week kind of trips for that, even
Mm,
if some of the time I'm not gone yet. Right? Maybe I go for 10 days, but I can
mm,
bookend it with some time before and after so I can catch up on sleep and unpack and do my laundry and all the mundane stuff that we forget until it's falling on our face.
mm.
Um, yeah, and then I usually like to take a couple weeks around the winter holidays as well, in case I travel to see family and stuff like that. But I'm greedy for breaks. Sometimes I like to throw in another one here and there that I'm just like, I want to do this trip, I want to see this friend. I do find that the like kind of typical corporate model of like 3 to 4 weeks off a year is not always enough for me. It's not.
Right?
Yeah. When do you find, Jess? What have you found kind of like how many longer breaks feel good for you?
I really like a staycation.
Mm.
I find if I'm traveling or I'm taking a trip, it's not quite the same level of self-care that I need.
Mm.
Whereas days where I can sleep as much as I want, go for as long of a like walk with my dog as I want. Those can be really incredible. The times where I go on a trip, I was recently in Edinburgh with you for our conference. I came back feeling like I needed another trip, like another vacation. I usually feel that
Mm.
if I'm in travel mode. So for me, I think being able to have a couple of those, even if it's just a week, being able to have a couple of those times where I'm just free. And I especially love taking a vacation when everyone else isn't, because then I'm not inundated with activities that I could be doing. Because often for me, if I'm on vacation, could and should get confused quite a bit. I
Yeah.
could go to this thing. I turn it in my head. Oh, I should. I have the time off. So around the holidays at winter time, I find that's not as sustaining as it might be smack dab in the early June. Um, that can be incredible for me. And I find having everyone else at work while I'm relaxing can be actually really nice because I have none of the pressure to kind of be on for somebody. And I think that that's a big thing as a psychotherapist is I think we'll bring it up soon, but we have to be on in our profession. I think with almost all the ones that burn out, it's because we have this 100% capacity to be there for others. And it's really hard to turn that off in our personal
Mm.
life.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, And thinking about that kind of too, I think for me at least, different types of clients can sometimes take different amounts or types of energy. So I sometimes find myself when I'm working full time wanting to kind of balance, like I'm not going to see four clients with the same presenting issue back to back. I
Mm.
might, if it's possible for schedules, spread that out a little bit. So like I am able to bring a different energy
Hmm.
to different clients, even though I'm bringing as much of myself. Depending on your presenting issue, it's going to be a different experience. It's going to be uniquely tailored to you. So I'd like to be able to have a little variety with that.
It can be tricky also with variety, wouldn't you say? That going from one emotional level to another one that leap can also be quite difficult. To go from dealing with depression and suicide
Mm.
ideation to a celebration, it there's a lot that therapists do that we don't often talk about. And that shift from one
Hmm.
affect to another, pretty much within a 10-minute span, usually between clients, can also be quite tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And those are things that I might start to notice too and kind of plan ahead for where I'm just like, I know I'm going to get this curveball on this day of the week. And so I am extra gentle in the morning or something like that. Or, if the client is like, oh, this time isn't the best for me, I'm like, oh, really? Maybe we can move to this time. Just knowing that for me too, I'll be able to be more present with them if I don't have this, yeah, big switch and energy coming up. I will say that, like, for me also, it's really important to have rituals between clients.
Mm.
Um, Depending on where I'm practicing, like it might be opening the window, letting some fresh
Mhm.
breeze come in. It might be using like kind of a room spray or incense or something that feels like it kind of resets. And I always make sure to get up,
Yeah.
to stand and move around and kind of just to like almost shift what I was carrying off me.
Mm.
That doesn't always, it's not always successful, right? There's a lot of our training and our capacity that is just about learning how to compartmentalize things for other people. They're like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to put this in my Ryan box and put it to the side as best as I can.
Mm.
I guess thinking about those different energies too, another thing that takes like different energy or different types of thinking are like all the various types of work that we do, right? We see clients and we have that, but then we also do admin stuff and answer emails and do notes. Every therapist's worst nightmare, doing notes. And so those things kind of take a different energy. I sometimes find that can be relieving, but then
Yeah.
I also sometimes find there can be a lot of pressure, especially in modern culture. I feel like there's a big pressure to answer people very quickly. It's become a very normal expectation for like, I emailed you an hour ago following up to see if you got it. And I'm like,
Mm.
no, I didn't. Um, so we have convenience has become pressure in a way with that.
Mm. And I think because it's unpaid work, answering emails,
Yes.
writing notes, marketing often, all these things can often go unchecked when we're thinking about our day. I know
Hmm.
for myself, for example, I might say, oh, I only work 4 hours a day with my clients. And it's not uncommon for me to get pushback being like, when did you start looking
Hmm.
at your computer today, Jess? I'm like, oh. 8 o'clock in the morning. It's like, what time is it now? I'm like, 9:30 p.m. Okay. Yep. I've been working a lot today, answering emails, having meetings with people, maybe having check-ins, all those things. We may not always count them because they're not something that we can have as income.
Mm. Yeah, especially if you're in private practice, if you're managing your own practice, yeah,
Hmm.
no one's paying you to check the emails. You have to do it to get money,
Hmm.
right? Because you got to stay in touch with your clients, you got to answer these queries and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not, you don't get any direct compensation for that.
No, and as we see with social media now, a lot of pressure comes from staying up to date on social media trends
Mm,
and being like consistent with it. That takes up a lot of time and bandwidth. And I'm sure there's some people that love it. Be that as it may, it's still something that can take up a lot of energy. So now
mhm.
you have this kind of thing where you're not just seeing your clients, you have to now be a presence outside of this world in order to feel relevant. That can all add to a lot of burnout if you don't know how to manage it well. And sometimes, as we felt last week, taking a break can be really tricky because we can have this understanding that we're letting others down, that maybe we're not being as relevant or as up to date. And all of those pressures can actually make us feel like, well, when can I take a break? If not now, then when? And as
Mm,
you were perfectly saying, no, no, taking a break is always necessary, especially when you may think, but I got to keep going.
absolutely. And I think like moving into kind of understanding that like burnout does still happen, even though we've just talked about these things and, planning ahead so that you can avoid burnout where possible. And we're also telling you that last week we found ourselves in the middle of it. It was
Yeah.
already happening and we had to pivot in order to care for ourselves. So it does happen.
Mm.
Especially when I'm thinking about, working full time in a nonprofit agency or something, so something I've done for a lot of my life, that can really look like going down in a blaze of glory. Like it's a whole mess. You
Yeah.
have a million plates spinning, and today I have to drop them all. I'm sorry, and it's gonna be a mess for everybody else. Um, and that does happen. That absolutely happens to us. We reach that tipping point, and one of those hard things that Jess was just saying with that is like then we feel like, I've failed all these people. I've let
Yeah.
them down.
Yeah.
We did find ourselves a little concerned about like what's it going to look like or feel like for our listeners when we're kind of unanticipatedly skipping a week. And we decided you guys would be okay because we know you're strong and brilliant. And we thought we have an opportunity to model taking a break when you need a break, which is an
Yeah.
important thing to do.
I'm pretty sure our listeners may not have noticed, Ryan.
I mean, right.
They
And
might
that's
have been like, I can get caught up in the rest of the episodes.
right. You're absolutely right. They may have very likely most people didn't notice. And that is such a big part of that too, that feeling of that guilt
Yes.
of like most people are fine too. I very rarely like there are things come up, maybe, especially in the transference and stuff, but for the most part, if I tell my clients I'm taking a break, they're
Mhm.
happy for me.
Oh, yeah. And when I come back, I'll be like, so how was having that time off? They're like, great. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not the end all be all on your Tuesday evening. Gotcha. Like it's important to remember that just because we are providing this incredible support system, it actually can be really important to realize that us taking a break can
Mhm.
allow others to realize that actually that reliance is not necessary. It may be desired, but not necessary for clients. And in this case, for listeners. But we can take on a lot of that. Thinking about burnout and thinking about who we are, we take on a lot of our clients' stories. One of the most important things as a therapist that we learn early on is that saying something out loud can make it lighter because you give it to another person. We're the person they're giving it to. And that heaviness, if we don't know how to mitigate it, and a lot of us don't, can bear down on us. It can make us feel a little bit heavier in ourselves. And what you were saying about the 10 minutes in between, that can be quite helpful. But it can be really heavy if we are, especially our trauma therapists, or we're working with heavier personality disorders. It can be really tricky to know where to put that. And especially because there's confidentiality in our work, there's not often a lot of places where we can just dump that for ourselves. We're often left holding it. And if we have supervision, but especially when you're in private practice, you don't have consistent supervision necessarily. So it can feel like a really heavy load that we're kind of holding on to until all those plates come crashing down.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a lot to kind of shoulder, and it's a helpful reminder too, just keeping in mind that so many of us entered this field because we had some desire to help people, whether that was coming out of our shadow side, which I almost always tell therapists it is.
Yep.
Whatever happens to be the underlying thing that motivates us to do this work, that underlying thing is also pushing us to probably do more of this work than we can sustain. Hence
Yeah.
that kind of that guilt and pushing ourselves to maybe even show up for more clients than we possibly can, or to show up and not never say no to a certain population or a certain presenting issue when we know we have a limited capacity.
Yeah.
It's often a person who's drawn to therapy, maybe a person that puts themselves last, and that can be a big risk for burnout.
We talk about that in their upcoming workshop we're doing for therapists, is looking at our shadow side
Mm.
of how we get into this profession in the first place. And I think that's a real reason why we might take on more clients. The other very practical reason is that if you're in private practice, if you don't work, you don't eat. That is kind of how it works. If you see a client, you make money off that client. If you don't see a client, you make no money. And that can create a huge pressure to keep going because we can almost wonder we're not on salary. So taking a break doesn't mean that we get to have paid vacation. Most of us in private practice, we don't have paid vacation. And so that can also create a pressure to keep going, especially if we want to make a certain income each year.
Mhm. Absolutely. Also thinking like, yeah, we have that income pressure for sure. And I think there's also a pressure that you may have touched on already about just kind of the social energy that we give. There's that social energy that we put into seeing clients because we're being intimate and vulnerable, even though it's within boundaries and in a specific way with clients.
Mm.
That I find then it can be harder to do that other times too.
Similar.
We have that, overall, I would say we have a limited emotional capacity as people. So if I see 4 or 5 clients, I don't want to see someone immediately after that necessarily. I can
Mm.
be a bit of a recluse after I see clients where there's some particular agencies I worked at that were like exclusively trauma work that I would come home and I would know that if someone spoke to me, I would feel like vomiting. So I knew that I had to go be alone after
Mhm.
those sessions. And that I would be fine if I could just be alone. I just couldn't take in anything more. Even if it was just like, here's what I did today, I would be like, I'm full. I am at capacity.
When I was doing my doctorate, we were told exactly that, to be prepared that our social circles might get smaller or that our social capacity will diminish because this is a job that really, if you're doing it quite well, you're not phoning it in. There's no day where you get to kind of have like a crazy wild night and then phone it in the next day at work, right? We're letting down people that need us if we do that, who are paying the same amount as they did the week before. It doesn't jive. And so I think that that social energy you output, especially to clients, giving each 100% means that, yeah, at the end of the day, what percentage are we left with?
Right. Absolutely. Um, And I know we talked earlier too about that. Part of that social circle dwindling is like we may not find that we have as much time for acquaintances or people that we feel we can't be authentic and vulnerable with, because that's usually become really important to us as therapists. We've developed this desire to be really authentic, really engaged in relationships. And for me, that means I'm going to be selective about what relationships those are. Yeah.
We also like become a little bit better at reading people. So we may not want to have this relationship because they give us the ick.
they might give us some kind of sense of like, wow, that's I've definitely had experience where I've been like, oh, that's a lot. I have no
That was a
judgment
lot.
for you, but I also have no capacity for you.
This does not seem like it'll immediately be an equal relationship. And we kind of learned that. When I was younger, I had no capacity to understand that.
Hmm.
Um, and like the amount of relationships I might have played quasi-therapist and really got very little in return. I think a lot of my social worth came from being able to provide this, not realizing I'm ostensibly just working for free without having a doctorate yet.
Yep.
And
Yep.
now I kind of can see that and not like I need a relationship to be very reciprocal and usually pretty meaningful. To be able to have that energy come back to me.
Yeah. And I'm thinking with that too, with that kind of social aspect, that there's also something you pointed out that the nature of confidentiality when we're working with clients means that we can't necessarily just call our pal up and be like, oh, I had a really heavy day. We could maybe call them up and say that, but just that, right?
Just that.
I had a really heavy day. Do you want to hang out and listen to music? Or it might be like if you had a hard day for personal reasons, right? Like say had a fight with a partner, had something come up with family, etc. You would probably call friends or people you trust and say like, "Oh my God, like you'll never guess what happened." And then you can kind of let go of that and vent a little bit and be there when your friends vent for you and stuff. And for us, we can't vent about client work. It's unprofessional. It's unethical. We don't do that.
And the fact that knowing that a lot of our friends will be able to fully talk about that work situation, a weird boss or an upsetting colleague. Generally speaking, when we've had a tough day at work, we need a nap. We can't have a confidant. And that can
Mhm.
be really tricky when it comes to holding it in. And people wondering why we might be off today. That it can be really hard to hold all in.
Mm. Yeah. And then just knowing that, like kind of like you were saying, like other people might not get it if we were to even share. They'd be like, okay, and it does mean it's really important to have consultation groups and therapist friends that so we do occasionally have these opportunities where we can relate about our profession and maybe get some professional support around it.
Hmm.
Um, as I'm saying all of this, though, I'm really thinking that I don't want clients that are listening to walk away feeling like this is their fault in any way.
We wrote for point three actually to make a really clear thing. If you're a client and you're listening to this, what we're talking about is what we put on ourselves. We
Mhm.
chose this profession because we're passionate about it. This is not your fault. You have never been and never will be too much for your therapist. It is their capacity to figure out what they need and their job to do it well so that they don't let you down. This is our scoop of like how it can have pitfalls along the way of us doing that well, not really about what you're telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just such an important takeaway. And it was really in my mind with this too, because as we were talking about this, we were really realizing that it does come up from time to time with clients, that clients will feel like worried that they're too much for us or ask like, are you taking a break because of me? And sometimes they'll say that jokingly, but it can be one of those jokes with a kernel of truth in it. It's like, oh, okay. There's something going on in there.
Mm.
And I always say exactly what Jess was saying there. This is my professional responsibility. You're not doing it to me. It's just my obligation to you to be able to show up well. And to do that, I need to take breaks. To do that, I have a really robust self-care thing. I do my best to kind of practice what I preach when it comes to you saying that, like, oh, I was really burned out at work and I encouraged you to take a break. I'm going to do the same thing to myself. And I'll often use examples from the work with clients too, where I'm like, yeah, you do you remember that when like all you really needed was to like be alone in a dark room and you did that and so you were okay. That's a really important thing.
Hmm. This happened to me last week, as we were saying. That Wednesday we were supposed to be recording, I had something come up with family member. And I actually had to cancel all my clients that night. And when I got to see them on Saturday, many of them could like move over. And I told them I didn't think I had capacity to do both end, being caregiver and nurse to a family member and being a good psychotherapist. It's incredible how many times people understand that and actually care back. I think sometimes as therapists, we can have this understanding that clients will just want to blame us for caring for ourselves. But a lot of times they're pretty pumped that we're having a break, or they understand that I may not have full capacity. And recognizing that humanness goes both ways, that I'm pumped when they have a break. Usually my clients are pumped when I have a break. There may be things in there. As a psychodynamic therapist, this can come up where who am I having a break with? Where am I going? What
Mhm.
do I choose for fun? But that's not about me being able to have time off. It's usually about who am I outside of this space? I think is really important that like we kind of distinguish between the two.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
for me it's not usually that I'm tired of working with somebody. It's usually that I have so much stuff usually in a week that for me being able to have space from it all, actually having the automatic reply on an email can be as important for me as having an evening off. Being able to know that I don't have to check everything every second is incredibly helpful. And one thing that I know I mentioned before, but being able to realize that clients are often one of the most refreshing parts of my day is really important for them to know. So I often will bring that up too if we're really discussing the relationship between client and I and like maybe where they're feeling in my life.
Mhm.
It might not be uncommon for me to say, I chose this as a vocation. This is something I love to do. I am one of those assholes that has a unicorn job. I love going to work. I still
Mm.
need a break from it, but it's not because of the work itself. I'm not counting down the days for my vacation.
Absolutely. I do really find that like I chose being a therapist in part because I like to be able to bring this energy and be with people when they're going through stuff and be really authentic.
Mm.
That's not something that every position, every career affords. In fact, many careers you're encouraged to not be yourself, right? To just be kind of a
Yeah.
work persona of yourself. And so that this is a really special gift for me that, I get to laugh with clients. Clients get to make fun of me. I tease them, like, and we cry, we make breakthroughs, we do all the things together, and that is what is enlivening about this job for me. So if anything, it's the opposite of that you're burning me out. You kept me here, as long as I was able to be here between breaks.
What you just said is exactly how I feel too.
Mm.
Like, there are many days where I'm like, how am I getting paid for this? This is so wonderful. And I'm often wondering when I get to see a client next, like how that thing went. I have no chill. And I usually will be like, how'd it go? Tell me everything. And I'm like, unless you have something else more important, but like, if you don't, tell me everything.
Absolutely.
And on the days where I'm feeling kind of burnt out, really ironically, clients can usually be the ones that pull me out of it. I don't know if you know that as a client, but it's true. If I'm having kind of a rough day, it's not uncommon for me to see clients and it goes away. Not the rough day part, but my affect towards it. Because I
Mm,
I get to just be authentic in a different scenario, in a different scene for someone else. And after client work, I'll come out feeling almost in a different mindset than I might have entered the day with. And so clients have a real capacity for me of allowing that authenticity and realness to come through in an avenue that can actually change my affect at the end of the day.
absolutely. Yeah. And that, I mean, that's the takeaway I want clients to have is to really hold on to that. None of this is your fault. If anything, you're our saving grace. And I want to encourage therapists and all other kind of helping professionals to really be intentional, mindful, and considerate about thinking about what are the parts of your job that give you the energy and the inspiration? What are the things you need to do between appointments, sessions, etc., in order to feel all right, in order to stay within yourself and provide the care that you want to provide?
Hmm.
and to not neglect your breaks.
Taking care of yourself means that you actually get to take care of your clients. And when we let other things like money or obligation get in the way, we usually, near the end, face burnout a lot faster than if we allow ourselves that consistency. So take care of yourself out there.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too, at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.